Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Luke O'Connor and I'm from Support Act. I'm so happy you could join us today. It's my great pleasure to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all meet today, and I pay my respect to elders, past, present, and emerging. For me, in Naarm, that's the people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all First Nations people joining today's chat. I also want to acknowledge the immense contribution that First Nations people have made to the modern Australian music scene, and also take this moment to commemorate NAIDOC Week and this year's theme, Heal Country. In celebration of NAIDOC Week, we're thrilled to present a brand new series of Support Act events, specifically for First Nations artists, artist managers, crew, and music workers. The first event in this series, Yarning Strong, will be held on Friday, 23rd of July at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. We'll be joined by artists JK47 and Uncle Kutcha Edwards. And the session will be hosted by Carissa Grant, who is our superstar Support Act First Nations community engagement and social worker and a proud Walpuri, Jawoyn and Gurindji woman. The free online talk will focus on First Nations mental health and what it looks like in the music industry, how music heals and is an expression of storytelling that has been passed down for generations, and why it's important for our industry to create a culturally safe space for First Nations people to express themselves and their history. So we're very excited about that event. Check out our website for more information. Support Act is dedicated to supporting the mental health and well-being of those who work in the Australian music industry. And we couldn't do that without the partnership of the Australian government, the American Express Music Backers Program, and almost most importantly, the hundreds of music makers and music lovers who support the work we do year in, year out. Thank you so much for all of the support you provide to us. Lastly, before I hand over to our stunning panel of guests and experts, if you are a crew member, an artist or a musician, or an artist manager or other music industry worker, and you're in need of financial support right now, it's a very tough time for our industry. Don't be shy. This is the time for you to step up, and if you need support, to ask for it. Please visit supportact.org.au to find out more about our Crew Keeper and Music Keeper grants if you need that financial support. And also contact our wellbeing helpline, a service specifically for people who work in music, on 1-800-959-500. You're not alone. We're all in this together. And without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Tim Shiel. Hey, Tim.
Hey, Luke. Thank you so much. And I just want to back up what Luke just said about, we are in NAIDOC Week, which is an incredible week every year where we celebrate Indigenous excellence. And the theme this year is Heal Country, which, is not just about healing the lands, but it's about healing ourselves and our communities and the connections between us. And, with that in mind, huge thank you on behalf of artists and the music scene, the music ecosystem back at Support Act for all the wonderful things that Support Act is able to do to help encourage a healthier environment for us all to work and play and connect with each other and with other people. So I'm so excited to be part of this today. Like, perfectionism is one of my favorite topics. It's something that comes up a lot when I talk to artists and when I talk to friends. It's something that I personally have dealt with or internalized or come to terms with over the years in different ways. And we have such an incredible panel of human beings to talk about it. Like, whether you're an artist or you're just working with artists or you're working in a creative field of some sort, you're inevitably going to come across perfectionism or feel it in yourself, because part of being a creative person or working with creative people is wanting the best outcome. It's about wanting to create great work, support great work, make amazing things happen. And inevitably, you at some point, will find yourself like owning that perfectionist streak, and maybe that tips you into a place which is unhealthy. And I feel like we'll talk about this today. And I guess what I'm really excited to hear is questions from you. So if you're following along and something comes up for you and you want to throw it in, you want to ask one of us something, or you just have something on your mind, please do hit us up with a question. We'll have time for questions at the end. And also, if you're in Zoom specifically, Down the bottom, you might not have always seen this in your Zoom chats, but down the bottom, there is a Q&A section. So specifically, if you could chuck your questions in there, that's where we'll be pulling them from a bit later. But feel free to just chuck them in throughout the conversation, and we'll get to some of them by the end. I also just wanted to say this information's in the chat on Zoom as well. But if the conversation today does bring up something for you that's difficult, if you find yourself in a bad place or ruminating, you are in a bad place, maybe for whatever reason, Luke outlined some of the potential reasons before, but if anything comes up, there are things you can do. There is, of course, the Support Act Wellbeing Helpline, which Luke just mentioned. There's Beyond Blue, there's Lifeline, there's people you can call, humans on the other end, you can have a chat. You can do it. You could do it right now. You can do it after our chat. You can do it on the weekend, but I encourage you, as someone who myself has made use of, helplines and things like that in the past, I can just only encourage anyone who feels any level of discomfort with their mental health to reach out for help. So let's get to our incredible guests, like 3 one-of-a-kind human beings. Does that make it 3 of a kind? I'm not sure. You all can come off mute now. I'm sick of talking to myself. So who we got? We have Kyra Peru. Crowd goes wild. It's always weird in the Zoom because, that's when it's like, yeah, but, it's just us. Kira Puru, an incredible singer-songwriter, amazing performer, has worked with such legends like Paul Kelly, Ely Earthboy, Paul Mack, actually a ridiculous list of collaborators over the years now for you, Kira Puru. Yeah, you've probably heard her music on the radio. You've probably seen her play at a big festival or something. Kira Peru is here. Give it up, Kira, for Peru. Woo, woo, woo. I've got to stop doing that. We also have, I don't know which box Adrian's in, but Adrian Eagle is here. Adrian, another mighty musician, mighty storyteller specifically, can also kind of craft a pretty monster hook from time to time. Born and raised on Ghana land in Adelaide, now poised to take over the world. Adrian, is that about accurate?
It's too kind, Tim. Thank you, brother. Awesome to be here with everybody and Support Act. Thanks for having us.
And we've also got Ash King from Support Act and various other projects. Ash is a provisional psychologist, a mental health educator, and a reformed musician. Ash.
Yeah, that might be a good title for me. Huge music fan anyway.
Music fan and singer and musician. So Ash is extremely across the intersection between music and mental health. It's now her professional pursuit, and she works really closely with Support Act. And this talk we're having today is part of a series that Ash has put together. So thanks for doing this for us, Ash, and for being here and giving us the kind of, we're just a bunch of creative, like loosey-goosey people, and you're going to bring us the real talk, which is great.
Gonna do my best, Tim. Thanks.
So perfectionism. We're here to talk about perfectionism. So let's go around one by one. Kira, would you describe yourself as a perfectionist?
I don't know. I mean, I am very particular, and I like things to be the very best version that they can be, but I think I've come to realize that like perfect is not an achievable zone for any type of work to be in. And I think I've learned in my quest for making things as good as they can be, it's quite toxic for me to kind of set those sorts of unachievable standards for myself. So I don't think I'd say I'm a perfectionist anymore, but I am very particular and picky, and I like to push myself, especially with my work. Yeah.
What about you, Adrian?
I would, very much agree with what Kira's saying there. I feel like it depends on how you define perfectionism. Because I think when it comes to my art, I'm definitely, I want to follow through with the vision. That's always a big thing for me, is just to, not compromise on the vision at all. But yeah, in the way I'm taking perfectionism here is that it's holding you back in some way. So I would say, no, I'm not a perfectionist in that way, but I'm very particular about the art. I'd say that, yeah.
Yeah. A particularist. Well, maybe we need to craft a new term today. What about you, Ash? Like over your journey doing various things, like do you have a perfectionist streak, do you think?
I would say that I'm a reformed perfectionist. Definitely when I was working in the music industry, I was a huge perfectionist. And you know what? It really, really held me back from doing so much cool stuff I could have done. I was never good enough. Nothing that I could produce was good enough. I really, really didn't want to put myself out there because I was so afraid that people would see me as anything less than perfect or see all my flaws and imperfections and really judge me. So when I moved into this new line of work in the mental health space, I figured, you know what, you have to walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk. And I've parked some of my, perfectionistic tendencies. I wouldn't say that they don't exist in me anymore. They certainly do. However, I'm sort of consciously working on them all the time.
I think like so many things, and this applies not just for people who work in the creative industries, but for just being a human being. So these tendencies that you can think of as being negative or positive or whatever, it's often not about eliminating them or beating yourself up for being a perfectionist. It's about finding a way to process them and make them work for you and understand them as part of understanding yourself. So given that all of us here, and maybe a lot of the people watching might have a perfectionist streak, I'm curious where maybe you guys think it might have come from, whether it's someone in your family or role models with music. Because, often this stuff comes from somewhere, maybe you've given it some thought. Does can anyone pinpoint where perfectionism maybe has come from in their lives?
I will never really shut up about like how internalizing capitalism makes people really obsessed with productivity and potentially perfecting things as well, and just sort of trying really desperately to maximize output. And I feel like I've been on a big journey recently with just like learning to let go of like the concept that my productivity is what's important, rather than like expression and playfulness and just like experimentation and discovery of self. So, I mean, I'm one of those people that's just never going to shut up about how terrible capitalism is and we should just destroy the man. But that's one concept that I have been thinking about a lot.
You're totally right. I think it's true, it can be a real challenge as an artist and a person who's, again, working in the creative world to disconnect from those systems, that idea of productivity and that the stuff you do has an economic outcome and generating more of it in order to do that. And there are elements of that we all inevitably in our lives interact with those systems 24 hours a day anyway. But as an artist, sometimes it's like you almost have a responsibility to try and disconnect from some of that stuff. But super, super, super hard. What about you, Adrian? Like, do you have a perfectionist in your life, like a parent or a friend or something who at some point kind of, put the seed in you of like, you know what, I want to really make it good,
Yeah, maybe, now that we're just talking openly here, I'm just, I'd never really thought too deeply into it, but I could say that, wanting to be great, or something like that kind of mentality might have been passed down from one of my parents, maybe in not the most healthiest way. Do you know what I'm saying? And actually, I want to change my answer. You asked if I was a perfectionist at the start. Yes, I would say when it comes to my art, I'm a perfectionist, but I don't let that hold me back, from sharing with the world. You know what I mean? Because as far as friends, yes, I've had a lot of young brothers like along the way who've been interested in doing rap or even singing, but had let their own perfectionism, which I would sort of say is just fear, for them. It's more so fear. Let them hold them back from even sharing their songs, or just enjoying the process, and just enjoying that it's a sacred, beautiful thing, and like Kira was saying about how capitalist ways come into the music industry. I've definitely felt that before as well, where people just want you to pump out things, you know, because it's making them money. And that, you know, I wouldn't say they're worried about perfectionism, you know. That's where I'm very, you know, when it comes to my art, I've had to tell engineers and producers, I've had to really, you know, cut some of them out or tell them exactly how I'm feeling, because yeah, when you release something and you're not truly happy with it, or it just doesn't sound, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like that word perfect in itself is problematic, you know, but if it's not true to your vision, then, you know, every artist is different, but to me personally, it's not going to sit right with my soul. You know, I can't sleep on that, you know, so it's a very personal thing. But yeah, there are definitely, you know, negative and positive inspirations that have probably led to my wanting to make it as good as it possibly can be, you know. But also I think, you know, there's ways around that, just giving yourself deadlines and just sort of just wanting to share, knowing that life is short and that, you know, you're only in this body for a few years. So just constantly be, you know, working on your craft and working on something that means something to you first and foremost, you know, something that's important to you to share before you die, you know?
Yeah, I'm really keen to get into some of those strategies and skills, like specific things you can do to kind of manage perfectionist tendencies. I'm really keen to get to that. I think we'll get to that in a bit. And also just want to remind anyone who's watching, if you've got questions, feel free to chuck them in, put them in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the Zoom webinar. And we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll get to some of your questions later in the panel. But Ash, you know, Adrian just brought up fear. You know, he just used the word fear, and I as soon as he said that, Adrian, I saw Kira just was like, you know, like, you know, perfectionism as a kind of a byproduct of fear. Ash, I imagine you've got a bit you can say about that. Does that ring true? Or
yeah, absolutely. And you know what, it kind of links back to what Kira said as well, because many of us grow up, you know, within capitalist systems, but also sort of just more subtly, you know, in our family groups, in our school systems, where a lot of our worth is contingent on our achievement and productivity, sort of as we get older. So we start to understand, or at least we believe that we are only as good as what we can show other people or what we can produce. And then this is a double-edged sword here, because when we feel like we can't produce anything that's good enough, we are afraid that people are going to see us. They're going to see us and that we're going to fail. And fear of failure is a huge one for perfectionists, fear of failure and fear of making mistakes, because we have been told, we've been indoctrinated with this idea that failing means you're not worthy. Failing means that you're incompetent. And that really hurts when it hits to the heart of who you are. So people, you know, neglect to consider the idea that many great people fail. In fact, many great artists have failed over and over again. Like, name me one incredible artist who's had a banger with every single release that they've, you know, put out. The thing is that we learn from things that work, we learn from things that don't. We can, you know, and the worthiness of that product or ourselves should not always be contingent on what other people tell us is good, or what sells best, or what people receive, you know, with open arms. So there's a lot in there, but fear is such a huge component to our perfectionistic tendencies.
I feel like this is a good time for me to like just, and I don't know if we all want to like make a confession, but I'm going to make a perfectionism confession and say that, you know, because I make music, and over the years, I've had periods of time where I've just made stuff really quickly and just gotten it out and not thought about it. And then I've had other times where I have just worked slavishly on that one song over and over and over again until it's nearly there. No, not quite. One more time, one more mix. And, you know, I'm kind of grateful at the moment, because I feel like, and it's only come through so many years of working and trying different stuff. Now I'm at a position where sometimes I do one and sometimes I do the other. So I've got some music that's just sort of happening and some music that I'm slavishly working on. So my confession is, I have a song at the moment that I'm working on that I started 11 years ago with with an artist called Elizabeth Rose. She's an incredible songwriter from Sydney, incredible singer. I think she's based in the States now. And we started a little fragment of an idea 11 years ago. And I think I've done about 25 different mixes of it, and like 4 or 5 different people have sung on it and I'm still going. It's still on my to-do list. So it's like, I think we all can, we probably all have examples of that, but it sort of goes back to what Adrian said, which is like, it's not, perfectionism can be really unhealthy, but it also can be part of the job.
I think also, Tim, just to jump in, that I really like to differentiate perfectionism, I guess, as we're discussing today, with having high standards for your output, for the work that you do, because I don't think that they're the same thing. I think that you can have both, but the word perfectionist has kind of entered into modern vernacular without very clear definitions. So when we're sort of coming in here and sounding like we're ragging on perfectionism, sometimes it could be like, what? Am I not allowed to want to do a good job?
Yeah. Well, actually, you touched on something which maybe we can talk about, which is this idea that, sometimes you do look up to a particular artist who you see maybe achieving things or writing music or doing stuff and that you aspire to do maybe, or that you would love to do one day. And that goes not just for artists, but maybe if you're an artist manager, you might have a role model. If you are running a label, if you are crew, if you are whoever in your life, you may sort of see someone and see what they're doing and put them on a pedestal. And we do sometimes put people on a pedestal for what we perceive to be a perfectionist streak. We kind of go, well, that person has achieved what they've achieved because they've never compromised, because they've been a perfectionist. Like a really, really basic, obvious example would be like Prince, who we often talk about how Prince exerted such intense control creatively over everything to do with his project, and that he, worked slavishly to achieve certain outcomes. And, I think we generally culturally have an idea of Prince as being like an intense perfectionist, but what we don't see are all the failures. The idea that Prince has not ever written a bad song is ridiculous. It just might not be. We just maybe didn't ever hear those songs. And you also forget that those people that you tend to look up as role models, and it's so easy to forget this, tend to be surrounded by an incredible support network of hundreds of people that help them achieve whatever it is that you are aspiring to do. And we're not all often lucky enough to be in those circumstances. So, Adrian or Kira, like, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you've had a role model that you've kind of thought, oh, I wish, why can't I get to that level of quote unquote perfection? Like, have you ever had to reconcile that at all as an artist?
I don't think, there's so many people that I look up to, but I think, I don't know. I think I learned pretty early on that like, that's just way too toxic for my brain to like put people on pedestals. Because, like what you can perceive as, it's so subjective. What you perceive to be a perfect work could be a complete failure to the person that created it. I remember hearing Tom York talk about one of my favorite Radiohead songs and saying it was absolute nonsense and that he hated it. And in his mind, it was one of the worst Radiohead songs. And I remember hearing that and thinking like, oh my God, like just that's so ridiculous. But yeah, I think perspective is a massive thing, and context, like, one man's failure is another man's like dream perfect work. So I think, I've learned to not put anyone on pedestals anymore.
Yeah, that's it. And just like you said, it's like, perfect to who? It's like, I think it's a very personal thing, because it's like, for example, I looked up to Michael Jackson as a kid, right? And it's like, I can't dance like Michael Jackson. I don't have, if he's what you call perfect, I don't have a perfect body, like, or perfect voice, so I think that's just where eliminating fear comes into that for me anyway. It's like, what's perfect? Perfect to me in my art is just expressing my heart and my message to the fullest. That's perfect to me. It's like, can I convey these emotions with these words over the beat? It doesn't have to be any more extensive than that, but I think just comparison comes into it a lot. Like you're saying, no matter what, comparison comes into it. And for a lot of, I'm just thinking, people who are listening to this, or just the young brothers and sisters who are, you know, about to release their first music, maybe it's just like, yeah, don't get too caught up in the comparison, I think, of what perfect is, you know, because music is so unique to you, you know, and if you're doing it for the right reasons, there shouldn't be, you know, a huge weight of comparison and stress and just all that taking the joy out of it for you. That's how I look at it anyway. But unfortunately, yeah, I totally understand where it comes from. And I think, shout out to Support Act for having that helpline, you know. I think that's an awesome thing, maybe for young artists who don't know who to reach out to, or, you know, you can always, I mean, in Australia, so-called Australia, you can reach out to most of us pretty easily anyway. Do you know what I mean? So, because anyone who has ever gone through that kind of thing and doesn't know what to do, I don't know. If you can't reach out to us, reach out to Support Act hotline, hit them up. Because, you know, when I was a young person, I used to call the kids helpline all the time, you know, so to have a helpline of anything is a beautiful thing. So, but yeah, if fear is also the topic that comes into it, that's another beast in itself, you know. And unfortunately, it does come into it when it comes to sharing your voice and your music, but it's a very personal thing. And like what you were saying, Kira, there with that person who was judging that music, that's my number one like thing I can't stand, is when people rag on someone else's art. You know what I mean? It's like, that's someone else's art. They didn't even have to share it. They didn't even have to share it with you. You know, they're opening their heart and sharing that and releasing it to the world. It's like, you know, it's not up for judgment as far as I'm concerned, you know?
Mm-hmm. Can I just piggyback on something Adrian said as well? I actually think I was liberated from a really young age in a way, because I didn't see anyone in the media that kind of looked like me, or had a similar background. You know, like I was from really working class family. I was like this little pudgy brown girl who just was a dork. I didn't have resources at my disposal. And to me at that time, it didn't seem like perfect was ever going to be an option for me. And I think in many ways, it liberated me from like a really serious quest for perfection, because what I was sold as the perfect ideal, particularly in music and in the pop realm, just didn't seem achievable for me. So I think I had the luxury really of never really having that as an option in my mind, at least. So I could play around on the fringe quite a lot and experiment with things that maybe people who had adhered to that very specific westernized, like white version of what pop music particularly looks like, would not have had a chance to play around with, because yeah, I didn't fit in.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. And it makes me think about, I think also just off that, we do live in a time with music specifically where I think maybe more than ever, the way that the kind of the conventional way of doing things, maybe as an artist and being a team around an artist through digital platforms and social media and touring, like there's kind of a playbook that's quite simple and quite narrow often these days, that young artists are kind of told, this is how you do it, you know, set your Spotify account up, try and get on some playlists, make sure your Instagram's on point, and off you go, get some good promo photos. Like there's a way, we live in a time where it feels strangely, and we're told by a lot of those institutions that success, or whatever you want to call it, is only a step away. You know, and that makes it, I think maybe, I wonder sometimes whether that makes it a lot easier to fall into not just perfectionism, but all sorts of unhealthy mental health situations, because it's so easy to have that comparison. Adrian, you just said like how dangerous and mostly unhealthy comparing yourself to other artists and other people, other peers kind of is. You know, if you can find a healthy way to do it, it can be productive to look at what other people are doing and be like, that's interesting, or I wouldn't mind doing what I do the way that person does what they do. You know, like it can be really healthy. But mostly when we talk about comparing yourself to others, we're talking about these weird ideas of success and making it and achieving things, which can be so unhealthy. I worry sometimes I think we do live in a time where it's more kind of seductive than ever, this idea of success, because it feels like it's right there in front of you. But maybe Ash, if we could maybe like start talking about some strategies and stuff. You know, I guess we've sort of established that perfectionism as an unhealthy idea is different to work ethic, which is good. Like it's good to have a good work ethic. It's good to want to create great things. But, you know, we've established there's an unhealthy brand of perfectionism that can hold people back, and that often that's a result of fear. What are some things that people who might recognize these traits in themselves, or who might feel paralyzed, like, oh, my music's never good enough, or my, you know, I'm never there. I'm never in that spot I think I should be in. What are some strategies we can talk about?
Well, you know what? I might jump in with a few, I guess, points of, you know, how perfectionism might manifest in a variety of different ways within all of us, because it doesn't look the same. And sometimes you can be like, oh, I don't think I'm a perfectionist. In fact, I used to say I'm not a perfectionist because nothing I do is good enough, which is kind of like a classic perfectionist comment to make. So, you know, we've spoken a little bit about fear, this idea of fear of failure and fear of making mistakes, because we're worried that people will see us as flawed, maybe judge us, and will feel excluded. There's also a great deal of fear of disapproval or rejection. I know that that's something that, you know, working in creative industries, it's just par for the course, right? Like, you're going to have to cop criticism, you're going to have to cop rejection, you're going to have to cop disapproval. Whenever you put yourself out there bravely and vulnerably, that's going to happen. There's also a tendency to think in all or nothing ways of thinking, or sort of black and white thinking is what we call it too, when it's like, well, if it's not perfect, then it's shit. You know, like, if I didn't get an A+, then I've failed. You know, so we don't have any room to move in that gray area of growth, curiosity, and flexibility. There's also an effort to kind of overcompensate, where you maybe perform behavior or engage in something, you know, over and over and over and over, because you're so scared that something's going to go wrong. You know, you might constantly check things or ask for reassurance from the people around you, like, is this good? You know, well, come and have a look at this. What does this look like to you? Is this all right? Is this okay? You might also engage in sort of things like excessive organizing and list making, which is kind of an effort to actually not actually do any of the shit, right? You're just like making a list. You're like, I've got a really good list. I'm really ready to do the work now. I'm really ready to do the work. And then, of course, finishing it up is procrastination and avoidance. So some people are like, how can you be a perfectionist if you're always procrastinating? You're always procrastinating because you don't want to do the work, because you're worried it's not going to be good enough.
Kira, are you feeling seen? Kira's losing it over there.
So red by this, I'm like, oh, I have to go back and change my answer. Yeah, I'm definitely perfectionist.
So, you know, those are a few of the signs that you can kind of go through and be like, okay, cool. You know, all these things, you know, not necessarily maladaptive or harmful in little bits and pieces here and there. But what happens is, if you're going to town on this stuff, then it's going to start to impact your ability to be creative. You know, creativity exists and thrives in a place where there is no boundaries, when you can be flexible, when you can play, when you can be free to like fuck up sometimes. And when you are putting all this pressure on yourself, you can't do the stuff that is probably important to you. So that's when we need to tackle this sort of perfectionist mindset and really ask, how is it holding us back?
I wanted to mention again, we don't have too many questions coming through. So, you know, if you do have a question or something you want to add, you know, now would be the time, because so we've got some space for it, I think, at the end of our chat. Natasha has dropped in a message though to say, we were talking about Prince. Natasha says, apparently Prince had a vault of material that he never wanted to see the light of day, which is true. And I think they're slowly making their way through that vault at the moment and releasing it.
He probably is up in heaven going like, no, keep it in there.
Crying purple tears.
Crying purple rain.
But yeah, but also Natasha mentions that Terry Pratchett, the famous like fantasy author, insisted that his hard drive be bulldozed after he died, rather than have anything else be released that he didn't think was good enough. You know, so it's important to remember that like people who seem very like on it and successful and have high strike rates, they may have like gone to great lengths to delete everything that wasn't, you know, quote unquote great. Yeah. So yeah,
So
Kira.
I think between like, sorry to jump in,
Mm.
like I feel like representing what you want to say as an artist is one thing, and then like an objectively good work is a different thing. Yeah, like I would probably want all of my hard drives bulldozed when I die, but that doesn't mean that like the songs that I've written that I haven't released aren't good. It's just like I wouldn't want my name attached to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep. I totally get that too. I totally get that. Some people don't get that, wow, why would they want the hard drive bulldoze, whatever? But so like I said, to have art out there that doesn't fully represent you, even though you might have sung it at one point, it's soul crushing, It's like I understand why some people don't get it though, And as far as when I die, you can do whatever you want to do with my voice notes. That's how I feel right now. Because it'd be a lot of stuff in there. There's hours and hours of stuff. So who knows, maybe we can give it second life. But I totally get it though. You can't release anything in the world that just, I don't know, just it's not you, So maybe that's just an artist. I'm sure most artists get that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, Adrian, do you mind sending me your voice memos? Maybe when this is, I'm not going to have you killed, but it's just in case. Like, it'd be good. I can put them on a hard drive somewhere here. It'd be good.
This is the green light. You can have them, Tim.
I just got to get them.
Yeah.
I think something just that I'd love to jump in with there is that, a lot of people who do have this sense of perfectionism that really sort of whip themselves constantly with it's not good enough, they don't consider the voice memos. They don't consider all the demos and the songs that never worked out. They see your output and they go, that is what I'm supposed to do. And then they go to do something the first time, the first 5 times, the first 10 times, the first 50 times. And they're like, it's not good enough. But they don't recognize, in those moments, that's where you learn, that's where you're developing your voice as an artist. That's where you're allowing yourself to make mistakes and learning what you like and learning what you don't. So often people who have this real perfectionist mindset, they just give up because they don't push past that stage. They're too busy comparing themselves to, the final products that other people have worked on and invested in over a period of time.
Totally.
I want to, yeah.
Craft as well as an artist, like all the hours that you spend like playing live shows or learning an instrument or, all that kind of stuff. I think that's why social media can just be so toxic, because behind that screen of like the beautiful pictures and the shows of the pictures of, large audiences and whatever, behind all of that is like just hours and hours and hours and hours of dedication to your craft, learning your skill, inevitably failing in some way, but using that as a tool for growth and learning.
Yeah. Like I have a sort of an embarrassing example for myself, right? When I was a teenager, my sister and I both started to learn guitar at the same time. And, we had fun with it. I kind of was just like, I'm not very good. I'm not very good. And, my parents would say, yeah, you've only been playing for 2 months. Why would you be good? So I got to about 3 or 4 months and I gave up. I was like, I'm not good at this. I'm bad at this. I can't do this. My sister, however, was equally as bad, as we progressed, and she just didn't give up because she enjoyed it. She was curious. She wanted to improve, and she just never gave it up. And now she's a singer-songwriter living in Nashville. Like that's the comparison is there. You can see what happens when someone goes, oh, I'm so concerned with being good and I can't see that I'm good in the moment, so I'm going to just walk away from this. And I'm still bitter. I need to pick up a guitar again.
The myth that you're going to be good instantly is a really powerful one, and it's one that's fed often by the narratives that we create around artists. Like, wow, this artist has come out of nowhere and they've got it all together. Like that's stuff you hear going around a lot. I think sometimes we could, as an industry, do better with questioning those narratives and telling those stories differently, I think. But I just wanted to really quickly like paraphrase one of my favorite quotes ever. I could find the link or something. It's on YouTube, but it's from a radio guy and a podcaster called Ira Glass, who's worked on This American Life for years. And he has a really great quote, which I'll just paraphrase, but it's relevant to what we're talking about. It's this idea that if you're a creative person and you are you are driven to make something and express yourself, usually you get into it and because you have really good taste, right? Which means you are actually incredibly attuned to the fact that the stuff you make at the start is not up to your own standards. And you often don't think about it when you get started. But, you know, the key, the best thing you can do is work. Just keep working, but do it with joy and with a sense of growth and a sense of purpose and a sense of like, I'm doing this because I love it. And I'm doing this because I want to like develop myself and my skills, you know, but we've got some great questions coming through now. So let's get into some questions. Max asks, how do I accept my art as it is? I feel like I'm very critical due to perfectionism. So how do you accept, this is almost a, how do you accept yourself question, but you know, does anyone want to take this? How can you accept your art? Even when you have that feeling of like, oh, I don't know about this. I don't know if it's there.
Accepting your art. That's Matt from Max, right? Going back to what you were saying as well, Tim, I just wanted to touch on like, I didn't release my first song personally. Every artist is different, but I didn't release mine until I was 26, you know? So, and my first EP on 29, you know? So, but I did have, you know, voice notes when I was 21, 22, 23, but thank God those didn't get released, you know, or those didn't see the light of day. Thank God. So it's like, trust the process. That's all I would say with any sort of creative process. I'm thankful that, you know, at 26, it was where it was meant to be or whatever, you know. Accepting yourself, yeah, accepting your art. I think at a certain point you do have to just let it go. That definitely does come into it. Like there's been some live performances that I had done, just all I can use myself for example, right? Where I've done some live performances where in that moment I thought, oh, I didn't hit that note on the third verse exactly how I needed to hit it. You know what I mean? I felt like that in the moment. But then I just thought, you just have to accept it. You just have to let it go. Some things that you can't control, you just have to let it go, right? You just have to accept that. As far as recorded stuff and accepting that, just is a message and is the truth in there that you need to let out, that you need to express. Because, you know, like I said, people are doing it for different reasons, but it's a cathartic release. You know, that's how it should feel. So do you feel fully expressed? That's the only way I can accept putting something out, even if the music per se isn't, you know, or, you know, there's room for improvement on the music, as long as your actual message is there. But I love to hear everyone else's view on that, because that's a loaded question. Yeah.
I feel like I found the 10,000 hour rule really comforting when I was like first starting, just like, and for those people who don't know, I think the concept is just loosely that if you put 10,000 hours into any one thing, it's virtually impossible for you to be bad at it, because naturally that amount of work being dedicated to something will make you good in the process. And I feel like with sort of learning to let things go or learning to accept your art, it's just coming to terms with the fact that you're just at one place in time on your journey to being the best artist that you can be, or the best person that you can be. And yeah, that one work is just a snapshot of where you're at. And the more songs you write, the more time you spend on your craft, you know, the better you'll get just naturally. So I think, you know, any time spent sort of unnecessarily laboring over one thing is time that you're spending not writing more songs, getting better at other things. And it's definitely a process. It's easier said than done, but I think just reframing it as like letting one thing go and focusing on a new thing is just allowing you to make one step forward in that journey.
And I jump in with saying, you know, us psychologists love to ask the question, you know, can you reconnect with your why? When we ask ourselves, why are we doing this stuff? You know, we want to try to remove ourselves from the need to achieve external reward. I know, obviously, yes, we need to make money, and it feels great to have the idea that our, you know, album's been bought this many times, or our video has been viewed X amount of times, or we've won these awards or whatever. But all of that is outside your control. It's out of your hands, and you could create the greatest song ever written, and due to timing or poor management or whatever it is, No one ever hears it. So you need to get back to, why do I want to say this? Why am I making this music? Is it because I'm trying to explore who I am? Is it because I'm trying to push the limits of what I can do? Is it because I want to share my truth as it stands for this moment? You know, my truth might be different in 2 years, might be different in 2 months. Right now, I'm going to say it, and I'm going to be vulnerable and put it out there to be seen. Maybe someone somewhere might connect. So you need to really turn inward for that intrinsic motivation of why are you being driven to be an artist and to create what you do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's tough. So much stuff ends up coming back to, like, you got to bring it back. You got to bring it back to what guides you and what you're about. What are your values? What do you care about? All right, excellent. Another question's come through, Ash, maybe for you. Is there a connection is there a connection between perfectionism and imposter syndrome, which is very common? Imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all know what it is, but it's that feeling where you're kind of like, maybe some stuff does start to happen and you're like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't deserve this, or I don't belong here, or, you know, is there a connection there?
Absolutely. Yeah. So imposter syndrome, that kind of feeling that, yeah, you don't deserve your success or your position or your opportunities, that you're a fraud, that, you know, soon you're going to get found out. I think that, yes, you know, when it comes to imposter syndrome, we're very concerned about what other people are going to say, what other people are going to think, and how we're going to be considered. You know, we're human. We live you know, side by side to one another. We're always going to understand ourselves and our abilities, in a sense, like as they appear to other people and as other people receive them. However, again, you know, we don't always have this level of control. And so I think it really does come down to the confidence of just being able to do something by doing it, as opposed to waiting for that internal confidence. Sometimes we're like, you know what, I'm just going to wait until I feel really confident in this, and then I'm going to do it. But you know what? It never happens, because we build confidence through doing. And yes, it might not be up to our incredibly high standards of like, oh, well, Prince wouldn't release this song. It's like, yeah, well, he probably wouldn't, but he needed to get to where he got to by doing some shit in the meantime, didn't he? So we need to really pull back from, once I feel ready, or once I feel confident, or once I feel good enough, then I'll do the thing. We've learned that, you know, sometimes you just got to do the thing, and that's when all that other stuff will come.
Just as like a sidestep, you know, imposter syndrome, Adrian or Kira, is that something that you guys have kind of felt over the years or over the journey?
Can I just say one real quick thing just about imposter syndrome? Because I heard this beautiful doctor in America talk about it, and wow, it hit me. It was just like, can we just get rid of that imposter syndrome? Because she was looking at it from a colonial point of view. Like, it's just like, it's, yeah, even just that in itself, it's just like, that's what they want you to believe, that you're not good enough. You know what I mean? They want you to believe that you don't belong in this space. When in reality, it's like, you know, just having that belief in yourself, you know, so that imposter syndrome doesn't even exist. It's a fabrication. You know, it's like, no matter what you're doing, if you're doing it, like we're saying, like what Ash was saying, for the right reasons, it's like, you just got to, you know, have that empowerment in yourself to not let anybody of any stature, you know, make you feel like you're an imposter for taking up that space. You know what I'm saying? And like, anybody who's got any song out on YouTube, on Spotify, whatever, I tip my hat to you. I commend you. I salute you. It's like, it takes a lot of bravery and just having no fear to even just release any song, no matter if you got 10 plays, 10,000 plays, whatever. You know, it's just like, I just hope that imposter syndrome can just be like gone, you know, just like blown up, that whole phrase, you know?
Yeah, it's one of the things I would say I struggle with the most, but I think it's so closely connected to your personal mental health, and that voice that it, like, to me, it feels like a reflex sometimes, like when I do something, or if I'm in a room with other people, if I'm like looking at other people releasing music or whatever, it's almost like a reflex, this voice that says, that's better. You're never going to be that good. That's never going to be a place for you. And it's so hard and it's exhausting, constant work to have to meet that voice with like, hold on a second, you've got all this other stuff going on, realize the context of the differing situations and kind of gas yourself up. It's exhausting. And it's such a real, imposter syndrome is such a real thing, but everyone I've spoken to in the music industry also feels it. So I think that's one of the saddest realities, is that we're all out here just struggling in our own little mental war zones, thinking we're all terrible, but also really admiring each other and being jealous of each other at the same time. So I'm sure Ash has got some great tricks that can help us with that, because I certainly need them. It's a tough one.
Kira, I think you've kind of already articulated it, which is like, whose voices are living in your head rent free, like who's taking up the most real estate? Is it these voices that we have internalized from, representations in the media of people who don't look like you, who don't have similar stories to you, who have different voices to you, these people who are like, what are you doing here? Like, you shouldn't be doing this. Are those the voices that we're listening to? Because like, if those people came up to us on the street, just like, absolutely, like, fuck off. We don't need you to be up in my face, telling me what I can and can't do. However, when they live inside our minds, we don't have that sense of separation. It feels real and true. Those voices, those thoughts, I just feel like the truth, because we're hearing them, especially if we've internalized them a long time ago and we're hearing them day in, day out. So, one of the incredible strategies that, you learn once you start, I guess, doing the work and developing an understanding of who you are and how your mind works is to recognize which voices are there that aren't helping you and which voices are. And absolutely gassing up the voices that help you out a lot more, that say, you know what, this might not be, as perfect as you need it to be, but why don't you, keep trying, or you can do this, or yes, you can take up space. Yes, you're capable. And yes, this might not be where you want to be, but if you keep working at it, you can get there. So those type of, like your cheerleaders, like your friends who believe in you and trust you and want the best for you. You need to be giving those voices the mic inside your mind and not the other guys.
I want your voice in my head, Ash. When I'm feeling imposter syndrome, I'm just going to have a little Ash King going, you can do it. You're the best.
That's why people have psychologists, hey?
Hey, we've got time maybe for a couple more questions. So if you are watching this and it's brought up something for you, you want to hear our take on it, we've got some amazing people with amazing experiences here that can kind of bring different perspectives to something that you're going through. If you're in the Zoom webinar in particular, there's a Q&A button down the bottom. If you've maybe just joined us, there's a Q&A button down the bottom, which maybe you don't normally see when you do Zoom calls. You chuck your question in there and we'll get to it. We'll get a couple more.
Tim, I might just jump in as well, in light of, if you're sort of asking yourself, well, I'd love to give those sort of friendlier voices inside my head something to say, but I don't know what they would. I've got a worksheet that I put together, which you can download within the chat window. Ironically, I spelt perfectionism wrong on the homepage, and once that would have shattered me, and I probably would have left this Zoom call and cried in a corner for about 15 hours. But I've grown as a person. So perfectionism is spelled wrong, but we get the point. And exercise number 2 is there with some tips on compassionate self-talk. And I'm not talking about, saying these things in front of a mirror or like rubbing your nipples and saying I'm the greatest person to ever exist on planet Earth. These are all really realistic, down to earth messages, things that you can say like, my worth is not defined by my achievements. I understand that I'm worthy right now, right here as I am, or, I can let go of the need to be perfect and still trust that I can achieve great things. So if you need a little bit of help with some of that compassionate self-talk, just jump onto that workbook and you can save it and come back to it.
Yep, the PDF is great. Although, just to be clear, Ash, so I should stop rubbing my nipples, or I can keep doing that?
If the nipple rubbing is working, I encourage you to continue.
Just wanted your professional opinion on that. All right, we've got a couple more questions. We'll try and do them quickly because we're running out of time. Georgia, hello, Georgia. Georgia asks, and I feel like I'd be very surprised if we can't all relate to this as artists. This is kind of an artist specific one, but hello peeps, my perfectionist streak is around fear of messing up the music release process. Specifically, I'm putting out a single soon. I don't have a team. I'm self-managed, so she's doing it all herself. And I've had 5 or so years between releases to raise babies. Congratulations, Georgia. So my perfectionism is related to a fear of getting the release wrong and wasting the limited resources that I have. Have you got a practical suggestion for dealing with perfectionism around the release process? I feel like I talk to artists about this all the time. Like that, you know, maybe you've got the music to the point where you're happy, and then you're like, I've got to nail the landing. I have to stick the landing when it comes out. Kira and Adrian, how do you deal with that?
There's literally no such thing. You can have all of your ducks in a row. You can have the best PR team and a bunch of cash to throw at it. And the landscape is just, it changes all the time, and you can't control who releases music on the same day as you and how good those tunes are according to, you know, radio stations or, you know, publications that are going to write about you or whatever. So I think, you know, just get as much information as you can, have some consultations, chat to friends, and just commit in your heart to what it is that you're going to do. And yeah, let it go. Once you kind of press that button, I think you've just got to accept that, like, you can't control everything. And if the work is good and you really love it, I mean, that should be enough at the end of the day. I think Ash touched on it before, but just like remembering when you do that stuff, it feels really high stakes, but just remembering why it is that you create music and that you're in the game can maybe help cushion the potential devastation if things don't work exactly right. Just remembering that you're not in it for that external stuff, you're in it for what it gives you. That would be my tip.
Yeah, and that is the tip. But also a practical tip that, and not all artists are always in a position where they can do this. And, you know, particularly Georgia, for example, as an example, like if you're a young parent or a parent of young kids and you're presumably working and you're pursuing a music career, like that's like hats off, like that's amazing. And so many people who work in music are trying to juggle everything. In fact, 99% of people who are in music are doing that, exactly that. But the only thing I was going to say as a tip, knowing that's not always possible, is to have something else going on in terms of have the next thing bubbling away. Already in your mind, be on the next song or the next collection of songs or the next project, whether it's a collaboration with a person, even if it's just as an idea. Like, okay, once this, I want to release this, and I'm excited about releasing this and I want this to go well, but part of me is already invested in the thing that comes after. And if you can be in that space, that helps you with detach a little bit from the things you can't control. Like you said, Kira, you can't control. Like you can set everything up, but you can't control what happens. If you can kind of detach yourself and get onto the next thing already, then at that moment just becomes part of your overall journey as an artist, you know, and it's a much easier place to be in with it, I reckon. Going back to, it came up just then, but this idea of finding the why, the internal reasons for doing stuff. And this applies not just to artists, but for people who work all across the music industry. Simon asks, do you have any good tips for finding your why? I feel like it should go beyond just because I enjoy it. Ash or Adrian, you got thoughts on that?
Well, my why, that's a personal question as well, you know, but my personal why was just the fear of, not fear, but the knowing that death is coming, you know what I mean? Death is coming. I was just like, all right, I'm going to use my voice for messages for my goddaughters. That was the initial why for me in my head, you know what I mean? So like Kira was saying there, like if the music is, you know, the music, if you're happy with that, honestly, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter, you know, how many plays you get or how many views you get and stuff like that, like superficial material stuff like that. It's like, yeah, but I love both those questions because, yeah, you don't want to, you know, not everyone can have the luxury of like being Matt Colby and like not posting for like 5 years or whatever. You know what I mean? Like you have to, again, my situation was different to most people. I was working in graphic design and social media management before I was releasing music, you know, so I had some scope. But again, like what Kira was saying, just surrounding yourself, getting some information, some knowledge. It's all free out there, you know, on little tips here and there on when it comes to posting or on that. But yeah, if you can remove yourself from expectations, like you were saying, Tim, like that's where the true freedom is right there. And also looking ahead, not being a perfectionist not being attached to the result, you know, not being attached to the result, you know, so just moving forward.
Ash, what are your thoughts on finding your why? It's a really important question, you know, because it's easy when you feel like you've found it, it's really easy to go, yeah, cool. Like, but you almost can forget that a lot of, not just artists, but just human beings, a lot of people go about their lives not having yet really like gotten there in terms of like, oh, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. What do you reckon?
I think, you know, the idea of finding a why suggests that it's not there and it's something that you need to get. Whereas I like to think that, you know, the why already exists within a lot of us, and it's probably already manifested in a bunch of things that we've done in our past. You know, in the mental health space, we would call this, you know, exploring your values, really looking at the things that have allowed you to feel fulfilled, feel connected, things that have brought you joy, and go, okay, what was in all those moments? Like, what connects all those moments? For many of us, our values, our deeper values really stem from connection, caring, and contribution. And I feel like music encompasses all of those. You know, by releasing music, we're able to connect with others. We're able to share our stories and allow other people to feel like, hey, you know, like I've felt that way too, or I've been there too. We're caring, you know, in the moments that sometimes I felt the most cared for was listening to a track from someone that I really needed to hear that day when I was going through something really hard. And of course, contribution, you know, as an artist, you can contribute as an artist manager, as a crew member, you know, like you're contributing to something that's bigger than yourself, something that's outside yourself. These are amazingly important, and they're the things that keep that fire going. You know, when we can't rely on external achievements, we can look back and go, does this help me connect? Does this allow me to care for? Or does this help me contribute? And that can help keep us on the right track.
Maybe just riffing off that, and we might be getting close to ending this, I reckon, but you guys have been so generous with your time. This is such a beautiful conversation. But maybe Adrian and Kira, I'm curious, you know, how does finding your why, like finding the thing that motivates you, how does that tie in with finding your people, which I often think is also, again, sometimes a difficult thing and sometimes a thing that doesn't come easy or can be hard to access for a lot of people who are trying to work in music or work in their lives. But, you know, how important is finding your people? And by that, I don't mean finding 100,000 people who stream you on Spotify. I mean, the handful of people that who you really care about, you know, like in your creative circle, you know?
I think it can be, I mean, it's really the most important thing, I think, because it just helps with your growth, your development, discovering your sense of self. And it really is just about values, right? It's just about like why, what it is in life that you deem important, and why it is you're here, and like what your whole shit is about. So I think it's really important to find people who have shared values, because it will increase your quality of life like exponentially. And if that's how you're feeling in your life, like that's going to bleed out into your work and whatever it is that you do creatively. I think I don't really know what my why is, but I know that I love creating, and I get such a sense of satisfaction from doing something that I myself am impressed by. And I love experimenting and having fun in the studio and just sort of flexing my creative muscles. So surrounding myself with people who have those shared values not only means that I have a great time in my life, but I also am creating work that I'm really proud of in the meantime. So yeah, I think it's incredibly important. How you do that, I don't know, trial and error. I'm not sure, but I think it's really important. Yeah.
Well, yeah. It sort of feels like perfectionism is a tool that if you can learn to manage it, you can use it. You can use it to good ends, but really you've got to be motivated by yourself. You've got to bring it back to what really drives you and what you believe in. And, you know, you can use that perfectionism as just part of a broad tool set that you have access to as a creative person or just as a human being, you know. Is there anything you guys wanted to add before we wrap this up? This has been such a great conversation. It's a big no. So Adrian, you're going to send me your voice memos. Ash, yes, great. Ash, you now live in my head. And
I'll send you some voice memos too if you like.
Thank you, Kira. Yes,
my
my email is mattcorbeyfan@gmail.com. All right, so hit me up. You know, send me those voice memos, and rubbing nipples, thumbs up. And so I want to thank, in all seriousness, I want to thank this incredible group of people: Adrian Eagle, Kira Puru, and Ash King. Ash is doing amazing stuff as part of Support Act, not just this series of talks, but so many other resources. I will again implore you, even if you're just feeling a little bit sus or you're just curious, head to the Support Act website, supportact.org.au. If it is feeling a bit more serious for you, the wellbeing helpline is the place to go. Dial that number, and whatever you're going through, you'll be directed into the right place. I just wanted to give a quick, while we're just talking Support Act, there's this amazing video on Support Act's channel with, is it Brendan or Brandon from the Teskey brothers? I think it's Brendan. I feel bad, I'm going to get that wrong, but he recorded a video for Support Act where he talks about, and he won't mind me sharing this, I don't think, because the video is so beautiful. He talks about being on tour with the Teskey brothers, traveling around the world, having the most like amazing thing happening to him and his band, and being in such a dark place that he couldn't process it. He felt like he needed to go to hospital. He could barely walk on stage. He's really open about talking about it. And he talks about how calling the helpline was the step that got him on the path towards, mental health plan and all of the things that were put in place for him to be in a much, much better place. And he's doing great. So, another huge shout out to Support Act, and to make the best of those resources if you can. Adrian Eagle and Kira Peru, wherever they are, they'll have music coming out soon. You've got to bloody listen to it. It's the best.
Yo, go buy Kira Peru's merch right here. Hit her up. Hit her up.
Love it. So thank you so much for joining us on the chat today. We'll all see you around sometime soon, and we all wish you the best weekend and the best life.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.